Welcome to another episode of Just One More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Carrie, Lacey, and Lee.
Hey.
Hello.
You can find us online at justmoorefix.com or on Twitter at justmoorefix. If you like us, you can support us at Patreon, and you should give us a rating and review at iTunes or wherever it is you find our podcast at. In this episode, we're going to talk about romance and RPGs. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
I'm Chris from All Things Good and Nerdy, a proud member of the Good and Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to right now. The opinions expressed are those of the individual hosts. Make sure you check out all the other great podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another episode of Just One More Fix. Couple quick announcements. First off, I know you're probably tired of hearing it by now, but if you live in the Terre Haute area, we will be at Game on South 7th Street on July 21st from 5 to 9, running Fiasco, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, Mouse Guard, and Bedlam Hall. So there will be a combination of those games being ran and played, depending on how many players we have show up. So if you guys are in the area, come on out and check us out there. Also, we are going to be in Mattoon, Illinois.
On July 26th at 5 p.m., it'll last for about 4 hours. There should be about 3 games prepared for you to play in.
And where is the game store at? Do you know?
It is called the Warzone, but if you're looking it up on the Google, you will probably end up finding it as the End Zone because it was recently bought by a new group of people, but it's on Broadway, which is the main street in the downtown area.
And is that in Mattoon?
It's in Mattoon.
Okay, right on. Very good. So if you're in the Mattoon area or Terre Haute area and you want to come out and play some games with us, come on out and check it out. And it sounds like we may be heading to Lafayette as well. So lots of gaming opportunities. Alrighty. So today you heard we are going to talk about romance and RPGs. So I think, and I'm pretty sure most people around the table here will agree that I think romance is one of the most underutilized themes in gaming. Would you guys agree with that?
It's one of my favorite things.
Seems legit.
So that's kind of me agreeing because I don't get enough of my favorite things. Like 7th Sea.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Why do you think that is? Is there anything specific that you think why it's an underutilized theme or genre for gaming?
Well, I think the reason that a lot of people don't bring it into game is because it is very uncomfortable. That is an area that a lot of people don't like to explore, especially not in an RPG game where we're acting out politics and combat, and a lot of people don't want to be like, all right, now we're going to flirt. Yes.
Well, let's also keep in mind that there's a reason the stereotypical group of gamers is a bunch of dudes in a basement.
I don't take offense to that.
But it is a fair point in that there can be some awkwardness, I suppose, that would exist if that's not something you normally have at your table and people just feel weird about it for whatever reason, right?
I'm going to kind of draw my line in the sand and say I don't bring it to the table because it's not usually what I come to the table for as a player. So I don't even think to add it in my games.
And what if you're related to people at the table?
Awkward.
Yeah. Well, and our table is our table is a little funny because our table generally is 50-50 male to female or very close to it, right? And it's also Lee and Lacey are brother and sister, obviously. If you guys didn't know that, surprise, surprise. But
So I don't usually hit on his characters. Although I will say when we ran Monster Hearts for the sake of the game,
right.
I made a casual pass.
Well, Monster Hearts is kind of designed to do it as well, though. You know, and I think
do it.
So but in the flavor of the game, though, it sort of
there are several Apocalypse World games that have specific sex moves. It's like getting bonus points,
right?
for having the
But
sex.
And I will say the first time I played Apocalypse World was with a bunch of strangers, and I blushed. I sat at the table blushing because I was about to use a sex move on somebody I didn't even know.
Me too.
He liked it.
I think we'll come back around to the strangers versus your regular table thing, right? Because I think that's an important thing to talk about. But I think the first thing that we need to address is to make sure for establishing a rating system of some kind for your table. So whether this is at your home table or a convention or whatever, is establishing some kind of rating system, whatever that might be, to what people are comfortable with. And then obviously I think whatever the lowest rating is what you go with, right?
Yes, I agree. Like if somebody gives a rating of when Fade to Black or PG, whatever you want to call it, and somebody says, well, I want to go triple X, you're going to want to go with the Fade to Black PG
Right.
so that person doesn't feel uncomfortable. Do not get the mean or mode of that. It won't work out. Somebody's going to be upset.
Do you think it's fair? Let's say it's us playing this game here, right? And we're going to run Monster Hearts, okay? Just as an example. And let's say there's the three of you guys want more of an R-rated game, and I want more of a PG-13 game. Okay, so do you think it's fair to tell someone maybe this isn't the game for you? Then maybe this isn't the group for you.
No, because I don't think anything is lost by bumping your rating down.
Depending on how long you've been gaming with them, that could also sound like, we don't want you at our table.
That's what I'm at. You know,
Like,
if you establish
Please
those
go
boundaries
somewhere
at the
else where we
beginning,
play this awesome game.
yeah, you're not kicking them out. They get to make the decision at that point.
Okay.
So is that what I want to be in for, or would I rather do something else? I don't think there's any reason for anybody to get all personally insulted by it.
no, I don't think that's why I'm asking. That's why I'm posing the question. Is sort of like, how do you manage that? Because, like you said, what you come to the table isn't necessarily romance, right? So there's a pretty drastic difference in scope from one end to the other in what you're looking for, maybe.
There's a difference between saying, hey, I want to run this R-rated game. Who wants to come play? And I'm about to run this game. What rating do you guys want to stick with? Because if you're asking, then you're going to want to go with what everybody,
I feel
like the
like
lowest level.
This is also sort of Love in the Time of Cholera and There's Something About Mary are two vastly different genres, but I'm not sure you can have just Fade to Black in
Sorry,
both
but when
of
you
those.
say Love in the Time of Cholera, I know you've explained to me what this book is about several times, but all I think about is sex and diarrhea. Like,
That's because you spend a lot of time on the internet.
Or at work. Or at work. Well,
I'm sure it's a beautiful story.
I think that's a different discussion though, of where you're sitting down. Are we playing Monster Hearts, right? Which could very easily be some similar, like laughable, crazy, wacky fun or whatever, right? At parts of it, versus I don't even know what system emulates romance in cholera.
Well, with the romance trilogy, which I know that we're going to talk about later, by Emily Care Boss, you pick your genre. You sit down together, you pick your rating, then you pick your genre as a group. So
Okay.
if you want to play a romantic comedy, you can play a romantic comedy. If you want to play like a historical romance or a tragedy, you
Right.
can choose to play that.
So I think the big point here is to make sure that you guys, as a group at the table, make a decision on rating and genre and what you want to go with there, right? Because that sort of sets a tone for everything.
I really want to run a Western romance where all of the women at the table have to play the stereotypical cowboy, and all of the men at the table have to play the stereotypical, like, fainting couch Western
That is
lady.
the
What
other
if
thing
somebody
that you
wants to play hooker?
No.
What?
Fainting couch woman. That's what you get.
That is the other thing that you're supposed to do when you play one of the games out of her book is you switch roles. So if you're a male and a female playing together, the male is supposed to play the female and the female is supposed to play the male.
That's
You're
cool.
supposed to switch it up.
I thought you said the roles didn't have to be the gender-based ones.
They don't. If you want to play like the serious person and they want to play the silly person, you switch them. It's dependent on what you're comfortable with because some people aren't comfortable gender bending.
All right, so in addition to all the rating and making decisions about genre, the X card is something that I think most people are familiar with. And while I think the X card is a great tool, where did it come from? Did the stoplight come from Gen Con?
So the stoplight comes from a panel discussion at Gen Con. I don't recall what it was. I remember it was ran by Contessa, and it was, I think it was something about female gamers and how they've always been gaming. Not a new thing.
Right.
But anyway, somebody was talking about X cards and different styles of game and stuff like that. And someone in the audience actually brought up how they use the stoplight thing from basically the S&M community at their
Right.
DM table. And I like it better because instead of a hard stop, it's like, okay, we're starting to get into uncomfortable territories. It seems like easier to steer things away before trauma happens. And it's also, you know, with people you don't know, it can be hard to read.
I agree.
And so then I think that the green is very helpful too. So if you don't know them, or even if you do and you're not sure how you're being perceived, and people are trying to kind of dramatize things and act things out too.
Figure it
So
out, yeah.
you can feign being insulted while at the same time being like, no, this is
Right,
really
I'm
good,
okay with this, right.
You know, without breaking rule.
The reason I everything you said about the stoplight I really like, and it's I think it's a much more useful tool. And the red, our stoplights have an X on them, so it functions the exact same as an X card. It's a hard stop. We don't ask questions why, and that's what it is, right? But I like the idea of having something to where you don't just approach it, not even realize that someone at the table is uncomfortable, and then we stop now, right? I like the idea of being like, we need to back things up a little bit and back down, and things are escalating too quickly or whatever, or we're getting too close to one of my hot button issues. At the same time, I really like the idea of saying if there's intense role playing at the table happening, you can touch, the green light and be like, "This is great. This is cool. I'm okay with this." Doesn't necessarily mean escalate things, but it means that what is happening now is good. And I'm okay with this. I think that's just a much better communication tool. You've got 3 buttons instead of 1 button, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just more effective, more efficient, and more useful and functional, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
And I think it works better for a game that you may not necessarily be going into it as a romance game. So including a romantic line inside of a non-romance game. Because it's very obvious you should make a rating before you start a romance game.
Right.
But when you include romance in your D&D campaign or, I don't know, your White Wolf game, you're not necessarily going to think, we should put a rating on this before we start. Because some people might be okay with blood, gore, give me R, and then maybe not want to be like, oh, I don't want to go into detail on what happened in that room.
Right. Are there any games that come to mind? I know there's several probably that come to mind that are specifically games where romance is directly designed into the game or it's a strong part of that game? Just as some examples.
I've already mentioned it a couple times, but the Romance Trilogy by Emily Carabas is one of the games that I think of when I think about running a romance game. It's got a 2-player version, a 3-player version. They're all different games. And then there's a 4 to 8-player game included.
Every time 2 hot guys kissing gets mentioned, I always get the fit of giggles.
I would like to get that game, and I will one day, and I will make everybody here play it.
It's better than Made. I'm just saying. I had to do it. I'm sorry. I had
The
to do it.
creators of that game are going to find you, haunt you, and smack you in the face with their book.
I probably deserve it, and it's okay.
Hopefully with just their book.
I'll take I'll take the lashing from the book. I probably deserve it, but
They will tie you up, put you in an apron, and make you serve tea.
no. The first one for me that comes to mind is Monster Hearts, because it's, for those of you that don't know, it's a teenage drama, romance, WB style game about teenage angst and relationships and trying to figure out who you are. And it is wicked fun. It's powered by the Apocalypse. We've reviewed the first edition of it. Second edition to come out now, but it's a great game and lots of fun.
So Good Society is a Jane Austen role-playing game where you write letters back and forth. And we haven't played that one, but I imagine it doesn't have to be romance, but when you think of Jane Austen's
It's a strong
stories,
part of it,
there's a strong piece of the puzzle is romantic involvement.
Starcross is another one we just kickstarted. I know we've mentioned it a couple times on the podcast before. It's kind of 2 people, forbidden love kind of a story. But what about some ones where those are all ones where it's designed as a feature of the game, right? Are there certain other games that you guys think of and play where you like aspects of romance in it, where it's sort of part of the genre of the game? Like 7th Sea is one that comes to mind for me, where swashbuckling adventure, high seas adventure, that kind of stuff, D'Artagnan, Three Musketeers, romance is a big part of that genre. It's one that comes to mind for me first, but are there any others?
All of them for me.
I feel like the World of Darkness vampire game, maybe.
Mhm.
Like in the new world, it's not called New World of Darkness. Chronicles World of Darkness. There's literally a story in the main book, the main World of Darkness book, where this lady is talking about how she got seduced by a vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's in like every popular vampire story of our part of the world anyway. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
Dracula, the entire Twilight series, the entire Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice, True Blood, like every vampire story that's popular where we're at involves a strong element of sex and romance.
I think all of them, because it's just such a big part of a normal human person or even any type of creature person's life. You got to make more.
I agree.
And
I agree.
so
It's just like when you think of D&D, you don't think of, romance goes in there.
But-
It's just not part of, like, Conan is not the romance, kind of world.
I don't know that it belongs in all horror stories. Like if you're talking about but even in the slasher flicks, I mean, there's usually some element of, these people were over here doing the thing and then
Right.
something happened. But especially in the more hopeless horror
Bluebeard's
kind of
Bride.
setting, like Bluebeard's Bride. Yeah, I mean, you start and you're testing a lot of boundaries with that, and there's a lot of encounters that come up. Not necessarily romantic, I guess, as so much as sexual.
But whether or not you believe and trust him at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And some of the encounters that you have the potential to where it started off as a romantic encounter before things went wrong for the bride, right? So that's
I'm thinking more like 10 Candles.
Oh, okay.
Like holding hands in the darkness at the end.
Right.
You know, as everything becomes hopeless, is like the last straw of humanity that you're clinging to, kind of.
Well, I think that's comes back to what you mentioned, what Carrie mentioned before about how romance and relationships between people are one of the things that make us human. So in terms of a game where it's crushing your humanity and you're being destroyed and killed, that's that last shred of humanity is protecting and loving one another.
It's funny because I was actually... Kenneth Hite had put something on Twitter about signing his book, This Is the End, My Only Friend, like a Doors lyric or whatever. And then he had like this ridiculous poll about, you know, what he should actually write. And I picked Beautiful Friend because I like This Is the End, Beautiful Friend, because it's kind of like, it's the scene from Rogue One where they're on the beach together as they watch the tide of death roll in. It's this shred of beauty amongst destruction.
Right on. I know we mentioned a couple Apocalypse World games or Powered by Apocalypse games, but Apocalypse World has the special moves and sex moves and whatnot, and it sort of is part of that, built into that system as well. Dragonlance in the books, when you read in there, the 4 things that it mentions for what makes a Dragonlance game Dragonlance, one of the elements is romance. And throughout all the Dragonlance stories, there's always this romantic element between several different characters, and it just makes things more complicated because
Dragonlance D&D.
No, it's like when you think D&D, I think most people think Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk.
When you say Forgotten Realms, I don't think anything. I've never read any of those stories. I don't know anything about the setting, and I just don't care to know.
I think
honestly,
Dragonlance is D&D.
Well, it's D&D mechanic, but the world of Dragonlance is different.
It's not
than
as separated as, say, Ravenloft or Dark Sun, but those are all still D&D.
So it's much less. The reason I think there's a difference is because it's much less Conan Vance style stuff. Whereas Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk, that's the foundation of what everything came from. And then as they wrote stories and things grew and they wanted to kind of diversify what it was, it became more of its own thing because it's lower power characters that aren't,
They ride dragons.
Most
I feel
of
like
them
most
don't.
of these things only matter to the people that
I've ridden
read
a
the books
dragon.
and run the game. Like when you're a player, they all seem very similar.
Well, I agree that the games are
Like if
similar.
I don't read the book to know the world, all I'm relying on is the pieces that you're telling me, and most of the time what you're telling me is how many goblins there are and what kind of treasure I get at
Okay,
the end.
but so for just as an example, in the Dragonlance game that we had, there was a love story element to it with Carrie's character and Bacchus, the blue Dragon Army lieutenant, right? And that's a featured thing in all of the stories. And there's this.
See, I thought you just added that in because Carrie was playing.
So yes, because
I did, honestly. And 7 Seas the same way. Carrie gets a romance.
well,
I
know-
figured you just did that because Carrie was playing the game.
Well, no, I do that because Carrie is there, but if you open the Dragonlance book, it mentions there are like several themes that it mentions that this is what Dragonlance is about. Yes, it's D&D, but these are the themes that make Dragonlance, and one of them is romance. That's one of the ones that they specifically mention in there. That's the only reason why I mentioned specifically Dragonlance, because if you get a Greyhawk book or a Dark Sun book or Forgotten Realms, they don't mention romance specifically as being one of the core themes of that setting. So you know what I'm saying? That's the only reason why I mention it. So, bit of a tangent. So anyway.
It's like a choose your own adventure romance.
Well, and you could
Adding it.
incorporate whatever elements you want to in any game. I'm not saying that, but it's just one of those things where if it's like they specifically mention it in the book, like, hey, do this, right?
Yeah, it's all Tanis Halfdrits to me.
I'd like for romance not to be the core driving feature of your entire plot, though.
I agree with that. I guess we've mentioned some things. We've kind of talked a little bit around a lot of things, but when it comes to having romance in your games, what type of romance plots or styles or whatever, however you want to phrase that, do you think work at a table practically? But it's like everything that's in a movie or in a book doesn't work at the table, right? So what styles of romance plots or whatever do you guys think work at the table to give someone something practical to use that may not have actually done this before?
Like something that I would suggest to someone adding romance to their game, a hook. It doesn't have to be push this romance onto the character right away.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have the characters introduce themselves, if they include their character's orientation, then that's relevant. If they don't include that, if they include an already established spouse, then romance can be relevant. But I mean, the game that I ran yesterday, one of the characters did something nice for an NPC, and that NPC became overly friendly to that person, and it was their chance to either say, yes, I want to include a romance aspect to my game, or no, I don't.
Mm-hmm.
There's a hook now, but that's giving them the option of having that in their game versus not.
So they decide if they want to bite on that plot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So like that is like my number one suggestion is just put the option there,
Mm-hmm.
and it can easily like be part of the go to the tavern, find a job scene, or you're fighting the bad guy. There's a moment of calmness. You're talking to another person. Do you bite or do you not?
Mm-hmm.
But that's coming from the DM perspective. Like I always try to put the option there, and I have had characters that just don't bite. That's not what they're at the game table for. But I've had just as many surprise me by grabbing a hold of that and being like, oh, I want to make sure we go back to the place where I ran into the girl. I want to go there and see how she's doing. So now I know that person is interested in a romance plot.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one thing I will mention, I know you mentioned spouses and that kind of stuff, is to make sure that you don't just use the spouse or the significant other or whatever it is as, oh no, they got kidnapped again. Because that's not a romance plot, right? That's just a boring way to get your players to follow the carrot. You know what I'm saying? So... Did you have something?
I don't usually include it in that way.
No, I know it's one of those things that's easy to do sometimes, and I think once might be okay, but at a certain point, it's like that's what deters people from having those significant relationships to their characters, not just being murder hobos, because they know it's just something for you to take away and use against me. And I do think what you mentioned before is super relevant to ask about relationships and connections to the world, because that's what brings the character to life and gives you buttons to push to see how the player reacts and make an interesting story.
And in one of my like really big campaigns, Lee started the game with an already established relationship. His character had a significant other, and part of his game was making sure that he could establish a safe place to bring her to his home. Like that's something he wanted to do as a character. But another person wanted to have a romance, but it didn't. Like it was just something. There was a plot around it, like helping the father out to make sure that relationship got established. But that just ended up becoming like, hey, downtime, I need to go home. But then I've had another game where the romance turned completely sour, and it ended up she didn't actually love him. She wanted to drown him and eat his soul. But
sometimes it works out, and sometimes they drown you and eat your soul. It sort of happens that way.
So have you ever run a game where you have all of your players establish some kind of romance at the beginning? Like as an NPC or with another player or...
Not at the beginning. Not usually.
I don't
it's
think
kind
I've
of
had
one of those things, once somebody at the table starts doing it, other people are like, oh, I think I want to try that out.
I think it could be cool with Monster Hearts if you were wanting to do a one-shot with it, to have kind of like a fate conversation where everybody sits down and writes who they've already been romantically entangled with, because it gives you something to grab a hold of plot-wise at the beginning, kind of set things off.
Well, and that's a game that's designed. That's what the game, a big portion of the game is about, right? So it kind of makes sense in that sense.
And that's romance between PCs, not NPCs, which is different.
Right. Now, I think one of the big themes to kind of go to for gaming is the forbidden love thing, which is kind of what we touched on with Carrie's character and the blue Dragon Army lieutenant, in that you guys were heroic in working against the Dragon Army, and this relationship developed between you and one of the evil lieutenants, essentially. And then there was some information gleaned and maps stolen and battle plans stolen, and it made things complicated. Do you guys, so I know Carrie was directly involved in all that, but you guys sitting at the table, did you find that part of the story interesting and compelling while it was going on? Or was it just like, oh, whatever?
Yes, sort of.
I felt like I was going out of my way to not feel betrayed by it, though.
Yeah, it was very hard not to metagame.
Right.
Just be like salty at Carrie's character.
It was an accident.
So was there anything specifically that happened? Like,
it was interesting, but at the same time, like none of the rest of us had something special that was happening to us.
Okay.
I was the wizard.
Right.
That's what I had special.
But you weren't like on a special. You didn't have your own special thing happening.
It was all my quest.
It was like, now it's the 5 of you guys' turn to do something, and now it's Carrie's scene.
No, it was Carrie's scene, and then everyone else's
your
turn
scene, and we were just in the
to
background
do what I told them
to serve the wizard.
Was
I guess
the-
we did have a lot of gully dwarf scenes, but I got saddled with that whether I wanted it or not. There was no consent in that relationship.
You know what? I really like the Gully
It was
Dwarf
non-consensual.
scenes.
You know what? They saved the day in the end. Just saying.
allies, no matter who they are, right? All right, very good.
That is something you have to be careful with, though. When you have that romance plot, you have to make sure that your other characters are doing something, so that you don't have three people going.
Yeah, well, it's about spotlight time, I think, at that point.
Mhm.
And generally
The
speaking,
story was interesting. It wasn't
Yeah.
like it was boring to sit through,
right.
but
And it did add another layer of complication to the game and to the relationships of the players, because it was interesting to watch you guys as me running the game dealing with Carrie after you kind of knew but kind of didn't, and it was like, no, I'm doing this so I can get these maps or whatever, and there was some interesting
I was distracting the bad guy.
there was some interesting interaction between you guys trying to work out what to do about it or how to reconcile what was happening. So
It's not like I healed him in a big combat or anything.
chirp, chirp.
right on. All right. So besides the forbidden love, which I think is the easiest go to, right? Are there any other romance tropes or common plot lines in movies and that kind of stuff that you think work well in an RPG at the table?
A damsel in distress.
Do you think that's a romance line? That's not like a romance plot line. It's kind of
I
boring.
don't want to say that I do hate the damsel in distress, but I have used it in a game.
I made it a dragon. It was in distress because of the damsel.
I motivated James' character with a damsel in distress
Which one? What was that?
in the Fate Kids game. But to be
Oh,
fair,
yeah.
you made a character that was not designed to cooperate, like specifically as a trouble, not designed to cooperate
Right.
with anybody else at the game. So it was like my last ditch effort to
Right.
other side from just going to scrap your character.
I followed along with everybody. Like, I was just the difficult adolescent.
Because I gave you a reason to.
Yeah. But I was an angsty adolescent kid. That's what
You used it and it worked and it was fun.
Yeah, it was. I had a good
Yeah,
time with
no,
that
it was.
there was not a whole lot of, like you said,
But that just happened to be convenient. It wasn't like she was the only one stolen. Like I made a whole village
True,
disappear.
Yeah.
And she
Well,
was your reason for
yeah,
going.
yeah.
But
In addition, though, part of that was that, like, when I designed that character, I was like, screw you guys, I don't want to go do this, but I was never going to leave anybody behind. You know, it was like, I'm the teenager who's going to pitch a fit and be angsty, but I'm not leaving anybody behind because, well, I'm not a total, The damsel in distress does seem kind of, it's boring, overused, I think, and I don't know, I just don't find it compelling. Also, I don't think that when I think of romance storylines, I don't think of damsel in distress as romance. I think of that as go chase the plot hook that's underdeveloped and overused. You know what I'm saying?
it's supposed to end in romance, though. I mean, that's the
Okay.
that's the
It
thing.
does in Shrek
I-
and Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and Beauty and the Beast and so on and so forth.
And The Princess Bride.
Best of the movies listed there.
There was another one I was thinking of. It's gone now. Kind of in Star Wars a few times as well. Saving Princess Leia.
Mhm.
Oh, and now she's been tied up by
Wreck-It
Jabba.
Ralph.
Now we're saving her again.
I would just like to point out that Princess Leia killed Jabba.
Yeah, but she needed somebody to help unchain her first.
No, she killed him with the chain.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Before
fine.
she gets unchained.
Fair
Then.
enough then.
Yeah.
They still rescue her that first time though.
Yeah. Okay.
And as she's keen to point out, they do a great job.
Not so much. Her sarcasm did not come through. Please comment there. All right. We've mentioned a lot here, but do you think there's any specific considerations where the romance is between two PCs at the table as opposed to a PC and an NPC?
Yes.
Say that again.
Do you think that there are any special considerations or things that you would change about how you go about doing things when the romance is between two players at the table versus a player and an NPC?
There are. I think the consent thing becomes a big issue. Because if you think that you're having a romance with another PC at the table and they don't want to have a romance,
Right.
you have to play through that, kind of.
Well, it might also be just a
Whereas-
meta conversation real quick. Like, are you okay with this? Is this cool?
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is what I'm thinking. I want to pursue this storyline, this romance plot or whatever, right?
Yeah, I would rather have a card than have that conversation with you.
Really? Okay.
Especially if I don't know you at all.
Well,
I don't
okay.
want to. I don't even want to have that conversation. I don't want to be like, "Oh, is this okay?" Because then if everybody else is enjoying it, then I'm going to feel pressure
Right.
to do it, even though I don't want to.
Right,
I would
okay.
rather just have a card. I don't need to talk to you.
Well,
about it.
what about at our own table though, where we're all?
I think I would still rather have a card.
Okay.
Honestly, it's faster. We don't need to have a conversation.
I don't usually recommend it.
I don't think that I've ever actually,
I think
We've had,
I guess,
Kurt and I had a romance
outside
in the
of
Orpheus game.
outside of Monster Hearts, that game being aside, right? We set that one kind of off by itself because it is like, that's its own thing, right?
There was a romance in the Orpheus game.
Was there?
Yep. I became Ghosty. We both had the same, like, trouble.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And then I died, and then he went to go move on. He's dead. It was a ghost.
she's all over here in the corner like, I can still see you.
Like, I can spend some stuff to like manifest right now.
It won't be weird at all. Not even a little.
Right?
Yeah,
He kept thinking it was weird.
I like the idea too of the card because I think there could be a cool PC unrequited romance kind of thing where I'm like, no, it's never going to happen. But you're
Right.
still like pining and, you know, like still trying to make it happen.
Because then they don't back up if you keep saying yes. Because if you told me no, it's not going to happen, I'd be like, oh, I crossed
Right,
the line.
exactly.
Back it up. Really sorry.
Like I need to lead you on.
Yeah, it's very awkward territory that
I agree.
That
Well,
PC
I agree.
I'm
romance.
pretty sure you're describing me and Kurt's relationship in Monster Hearts.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Except Kurt is always very vigorous about being okay with things. Like, he's all right. You know, it's all right. Like, it's no question.
It's an all or nothing.
I like the use of the word vigorous. It's kind of how I want my romance in the games anyway.
I'm saving longevity for later.
All right. Well, with all that, a lot of the stuff we've talked about is at your own table, right? Where you're relatively comfortable probably with the people around the table with you that you've been gaming with for a while, maybe or whatever. But what if you're at a con game or if you're new to the table and it's a bunch of strangers? Do you think that there are any specific considerations other than everything we've already mentioned with consent and ratings and all that kind of stuff, right?
I feel like maybe if they're new to the table, you probably shouldn't jump on in with the romance game at all.
Well,
But we played Apocalypse World
Yeah.
with a bunch of strangers.
Right, but being new to the table implies that the table has a history and you're new to that group.
Oh, I just thought you meant like
Okay.
new to
Not
a table.
like
like a
everyone
single
is new.
outsider.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
a single
let's
outside.
all try and get with the new guy.
Right.
Well,
Right.
We've never pursued a plot with him. Let's go.
Fresh meat.
First one to get him gets him.
Well, I think that you're right in that case. I think
I just have a list of creepy one-liners
Less of more.
floating through my
Yeah.
head.
well, but I think it could be very quickly turn into some serious weirdness and awkwardness and just bad, lots of bad, right?
You're like,
So
I'm never going back there. No.
Yeah. Well, I think that in those cases, unless they've sat down to play a game that's specifically about that style of thing, like Monster Hearts or whatever, right? Then obviously I think you back off of that and let everybody get acclimated to one another and then sort of just learn what each other likes in your stories and then pursue whatever it is that everybody likes. So I think that's a very relevant point because it would be terribly awkward if you came into a table where everyone like knew each other and then you sat down and it was like, oh, so that's what we're doing. I'm not in,
Well,
so.
let me tell you about when I started gaming over at Travis's house, and there was a goblin game and a goblin love triangle, wherein I was the hot commodity in the goblin community.
But only their tribe had been decimated. I think you were the only female remaining in the
Yes.
goblin tribe.
Yep.
So they needed to repopulate the
So
world.
this is why Lacey doesn't like
It was actually
romance in games.
really hilarious and fun, honestly.
Yeah, it was more of there's something about goblinoid type of plot
Right, yeah.
line as
Yeah.
opposed to, it was very tongue in cheek and good hearted and whatever. And it was fun. And, I don't know, it was, just goofy, wacky fun, because it was, everybody's a goblin. Death was only 4 hit points away, so everybody kind of knew it was caution to the wind and let's have fun and just have a good time with it. And it created some funny, silly moments, I guess. I like the idea of a game being called There's Something About Goblinoid.
I feel like it's going to be a little different in a con game because people generally understand what they're signing up for when they sit down at the table.
I
think
don't
that's
agree with
probably-
you.
No?
I don't think people know. Like, I specifically go to try games that I haven't tried before, and I didn't know that Apocalypse World had sex moves.
But a romance-specific game at a con game, you're going to get the little blurb that says what the game
Yeah,
is.
it should
But,
say
well,
something in your elevator.
We went to go
pitch.
play that LARP, and there was romance in that LARP, and there was not supposed to be any romance in that LARP. It was an end of the world thing.
How is there not romance at the end of the world?
Well,
I
It
was
feels like the most
busy.
appropriate
I
place
know you
for
probably
romance.
well, I mean, so as a female, like not that I think it's a big thing, but I sit down at a table and people are way more comfortable role playing romance with their preferred gender.
That's true. I feel
So
like.
I feel like I get offered a romance plotline, either with a PC or NPC, more often than you do.
Oh,
But-
you're saying where the game master is the opposite sex from me, or what?
Yeah,
you're the
either the game
you're
master or the
preferred
other
gender.
players.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, I understand what
So
you're saying
if I'm playing with a group of 5 guys and 4 of them prefer to be with a woman, they're going to be more comfortable pursuing a romantic line. Even if I'm not the only woman character at the table, they're going to be more comfortable being like, hey,
now. I see what you're saying. I agree.
you want to?
I agree.
But at that point, what I did in both the Apocalypse World game and a couple of games at our table when I wasn't really in that kind of mood, I was like, yeah, okay, my character would be down for that. Fade to black.
right.
Because I don't really want to talk about that.
Well, that's a really good line though too, because even outside of if you need to hit the red light or the X card, absolutely do it. But I think fade to black. If we're having a scene and I say I'm okay with this fade to black, that's a pretty clear message what that means, right?
Mhm.
I think it's pretty unequivocal, right? So you mentioned an interesting point though. You're about preferred genders and plots table. Did you feel, Lee, any awkwardness? Like, so in our Monster Hearts game, one of the teachers ended up being a Maidai because it's Monster Hearts, right? So this hedonistic goddess that I modeled off of the second season of True Blood. Did you think that there was awkwardness or weirdness when we were talking about and sort of setting up the scenes and playing that game?
Oh, between me and the NPC and Dave?
Yeah, or me and you and because I was running the game.
No, I think that was the first time I'd ever hit on a character that was being played by a dude.
Right.
And once I got over the fact that I was hitting on Kurt, the thing between me and you and Dave with the teacher and our 2 characters was
Okay, so it was right. So it was the initial hump of getting past. Okay, right.
The
on.
So Kurt, what's your
Initial
first hump?
I'm full of puns today. That's just terrible. So, because as you mentioned that though, I started thinking about it, and I don't know if it's because in the moment when I'm running the game, there's so much going on in my head, and I'm more focused on story as opposed to sometimes the details of what might make me feel awkward because I'm trying to plan ahead and where is the storyline going, all that stuff. Like, it doesn't even occur to me to feel awkward because I'm trying to plan ahead. Plus that we're playing Monster Hearts, and that's sort of what the storylines in game world is about, right? So,
I kind of latched on to romance in the Blades in the Dark game that we had, but I was playing a character that was into the weird anyway, and so I just sort of envisioned it as very like pansexual in
Right.
nature. So you described a beautiful, powerful woman, and I was like,
right.
seize
Sounds
the opportunity.
right.
She's a little crazy. I like her more.
That's a great example of where you said that's not romance plot lines aren't even something that you look for, but in that game, that was a very big part of that game. Did you like that storyline and how it went and complicated things? And
Yeah. I was very, very sad that one of my fellow PCs put an end to her life. I feel like we could have turned it around.
wah wah, sad day. Right on. Okay, very cool.
The cool thing about Monster Hearts, though, for romance, though, is you're playing high schoolers. So the awkwardness of playing romance
Oh yeah, it's totally there.
is okay in character.
Right.
Because it is awkward
Right.
the entire time. And it's beautiful.
Do you think as a GM you should be offering in a more obvious fashion different genders of NPCs to every player? Like, should I make an NPC and maybe I describe this dashingly handsome man and maybe he goes ahead and hits on Lee's character?
That has happened in my games. Usually there's like this, out of
Again,
character
you don't
real
have to
quick.
force it, but
Is that guy hitting on me? Like, am I like, because I have had male characters
Sometimes that's conversations that happen
hit
in
on
real
male
life.
players,
Wait.
and they're like, he's really friendly. Hang on. Is he being really, really friendly? Like, am I getting that vibe? And I'm like, yes, you are. You are definitely getting that vibe. He is definitely interested in you. Are you flirting back? And usually the answer is no. But sometimes they're like, I'm going to play dumb. Like, I'm okay with him hitting on me. Maybe he'll give me a discount at the store or something like that.
Right.
And I've had female characters turn down male characters in the game because they weren't into men. And they were like, oh.
Right.
have you had any kind of gender neutral appearing people at all?
Androgynous characters?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And like offered them as a romance?
I have to think about that one. I have considered it, but I haven't had the opportunity where I think that people at the table would be comfortable.
Okay.
Like, I have included androgynous characters, but I think people get weirdly uncomfortable about that.
But it is one of the pieces of Monster Hearts because one of the choices on a lot of the playbooks is androgynous or something along that flavor of adjective or whatever. And I think when you talk about setting up NPCs and characters and how they relate to each other and flirting and whatever and gender and all that stuff, in Monster Hearts, I never even gave it a second thought, but I think that's because of how Monster Hearts is structured. Because it specifically says in there that you're not supposed to decide your character's sexual orientation, right? It just, and that's part of the game baked into it. So I, as a game master, kind of liked the idea that was sort of freeing in a way, that it was just like, it doesn't matter. We've all sat down and agreed that this is the sort of the framework of this game, right? And everybody's on the level, and let's just have fun and go with it. And I thought it was very interesting and fun and changed a lot of stuff because there were a lot of things and moments that were great and a lot of fun that probably would have never happened had we not had that framework that Monster Hearts builds into the game, right? Because
So you think in most instances everybody is okay with it, they just have to be given permission?
I think so. And we all sat down to the table knowing that this is what this game is about, and these are a few specific things, right? No one decides their sexual orientation for this game, right? That's up in the air for the entire game, basically. And the few other things that Monster Hearts lays out, and I think going at it that way is sort of, it gets rid of a lot of the artificial baggage that a lot of people have about that sometimes, assuming you're comfortable with playing that game, right? But it sort of strips away all the baggage that people sometimes associate with that for whatever reasons, and is just sort of liberating. It's like, hey, let's just go wild and have fun and see where this story goes. And that's one of the most memorable games that I have ran in recent times, and even just my entire gaming career, because it was so just tangled up. And I like political games, right? And granted, it's a different kind of politics, right? But it's still relationships and all this kind of stuff. And it was so tangled up and interwoven. And a lot of that is because of things that you guys did as players, but also things I did as an MC or whatever to sort of build that into there. And you guys all grabbed onto it with both hands and just said, let's, go crazy,
Maybe you shouldn't finish that sentence.
Well, I mean, it wasn't like it was some...
I was visualizing it.
Which
is why I'm okay with Fade to Black.
But it wasn't some crazy orgy, the whole time. But it was a fun game, right?
70-30.
I wouldn't say it was that much, but there were several love triangles in that game, and it made the entire thing more interesting. And more importantly, there were still other things going on in the world than just that had to be dealt with. It was just this complicated relationship of, train wreck of high school romance, right? That existed along with it. So
I haven't ran it, but for Free RPG Day, I got the Kids on Bikes is one of the things I picked up. And I read it, and one of the first things you do is everybody lists what they want to see in game. And then the next thing you do is everybody lists what they're okay with seeing, which can't possibly include everything. And then the third thing everybody does is list what they absolutely do not want to see. And that would be a really cool thing to find out if, to do with any game, to find out if you even should explore what kind of romance to include in your game. I like that. I haven't ran it yet, but that was really cool when I read that.
I don't know if you guys remember, but one time for a game that we ran, I think I asked you guys to rate 4 different things, and it was like combat, adventure, romance, intrigue, and politics, maybe.
I don't think you ran it. I think you made us give you the ratings, and then you never ran it.
So, but I think that's an interesting tool to use, though, because that will tell you, maybe I involve a romance plot, but it's mostly circling around these two characters, not necessarily them together, but they are the ones that are more interested in romance, and maybe someone else's players that's a 0 for me. I didn't manage that at all. And it's a good way to sort of feel things out, right?
So in giving somebody a romance, I think it's important to give that NPC, assuming we're talking about an NPC, other goals and another purpose for being there that is not just that romance.
Right.
Something that gives them a reason to be unavailable, something that makes the situation more difficult. Like, I don't want them to just be this person's love interest. They should have their own mission and purpose.
Right on. I agree. That makes
depth, more full. I guess they should have some sort of depth.
I like that. I agree with that.
All right, so I think that'll do it for us. If you guys are interested in trying out some specific romance-based games, I think that the couple that we mentioned are great to try it out to see if it is for you or your table. So the Romance Trio by
Which-
Emily Care Boss.
The first scenario in that is for 2 people,
Mhm.
and I ran it with my spouse, and I was very comfortable running that game with my spouse.
Mhm.
I am going to try the second scenario that's 3 people with other people that I'm not romantically involved in,
Right.
and I will let people know eventually if
Right.
that's comfortable or uncomfortable. Because including romance and then actually playing a romance game is
It's
different.
2 different things, yeah. And I think if you want to try this, Monster Hearts is a great way to do it, assuming that you have the group sit down and they're all okay with it, because then it's very clear what the game sort of is, and it gives everyone at the table sort of permission isn't the right word, but puts them in the mindset that this is what we're going to do, right? And like I said, it just feels
And
sort of
there's an adventure with it too. So
Yeah.
if you're like trying it out, you still have that adventure to do while testing out romance without just being in a romance game and not knowing if you liked it. Because I walked away from the romance game that Lee and I had way happier about it than he was. He still liked it a lot, but it wasn't. But I liked it more.
Did you lose? I lost at the romance game.
No, he just played this very sad character. It was very hard to have romance. I just wanted romance, and he just kept making me cry.
sad day, quite literally.
Put me in his dead wife's dress. It was just terrible. It was terrible.
Well, that sounds magical.
Sounds like Bluebeard's Bride to me.
No, it was. I was like, "Ooh, we're gonna play a romance game." Oh God. Oh, put away the cheese and crackers and the wine. I'm not comfortable anymore.
Right on. Well, if you guys have played any romance games and have that we haven't mentioned here, please let us know, because we're all about trying new games and
Or try RPGers.
yeah, we just like games. They're fun. And at the same time, if you have any practical tools or techniques that you've used to make romance work in your games, hit us up on Twitter or Facebook and let us know what has worked for you.
We'll try it out.
Absolutely. So quick Gonna Geek promo for All Things Good and Nerdy, episode 317, hashtag the Clueless Willie. I feel like that's relevant to this episode. Willie has returned from E3 travels just in time to be challenged to live tweet the movie Clueless. Oh my God. 1994 called. Once the challenge has been accepted, Chris has the details on an early buzz surrounding Ant-Man and the Wasp. Looks awesome. We saw the preview today. Willie has the details on the title of the upcoming Spider-Man sequel, and Anthony geeks out over Amazon picking up the Invincible cartoon. So check that out. That's All Things Good and Nerdy on the Gonna Geek Network. And I think that'll do it for us. Hopefully we'll see you guys in the next couple weeks at our Indie RPG Days at the couple game stores we're going to be at, if you guys are in the local area. And otherwise, we will see you guys next week.
Later.
Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at Incompetech.com. You can support us at Patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix or follow us on Twitter at Just One More Fix.